Well, actually, the Uranus-Pluto square is part of a much larger complex, because at the same time Saturn will be opposing Uranus and squaring Pluto, and Jupiter will be going through it as well, which means that every outer planet will be involved in this except for Neptune, for which we can have small blessings. Uranus-Pluto is a combination of revolutionary overthrow. And the fact this aspect is occurring around 0 degrees of cardinal signs, that is to say, Saturn will be at 0 Aries, excuse me, Uranus will be at 0 Aries, Saturn will be at 0 Libra, and Pluto at 0 Capricorn, gives it a much more potent potential effect than what happened in the 60s. I don't know if it'll be as long. I don't think it'll necessarily give rise to a movement, but I think there's going to be a very acute crisis, because many astrologers believe, and I tend to be of their number, that the 0 degrees of the cardinal signs, which is where the seasons change, beginning of spring, beginning of summer, beginning of fall, beginning of winter, function to the world the way the rising degree and culminating degree function to individuals. And the result of this is that it's basically a powerful transit to the world. To give you some idea of the impact of previous similar transits, exactly 1/2 a Pluto cycle ago, in August of 1914, Pluto crossed 0 Cancer, and World War I began. The fact that we have all these major things piling up at the moment is a very bad sign. Food shortages, the major storms, the rising cost of oil, suggests that there's going to be an acute crisis within the next few years, and this Uranus-Pluto will probably time it. It means revolutionary overthrow. Therefore, that's not necessarily revolutionary overthrow in the common sense of a revolution, but a revolutionary transformation, so that the world afterwards will be very different from the world before. Couple this with the Mayan prophecies, which come due in 2012, and some fixed star changes that come due in 2017. The next 10 years are going to be really dramatic. And I don't think you really need astrology anymore to tell you that, but we've been talking about this now for several years. 2 years ago, at the British Astrological Association annual convention, I did a joint seminar on mundane astrology, which means predicting events for the world, with a Frenchman whose name escapes me at the moment, but he was brilliant. So if he hears this and I don't remember his name, remember I said to him, I said that he's brilliant. But there's a whole group of them who do mundane astrology in France, and their material is extremely good, and they were very, very worried about this period. We're actually already in it, because Pluto is already going back and forth over the cardinals. And all of this dancing around in these degrees will occupy us till about 2012. I don't put a lot of credence into the Mayan calendar, but there are other things as well, these aspects for one. A brief comment about the Mayan calendar. I recognize the structures on which it's based. It's like the Babylonian system, where everything is done in whole numbers of days. And you can, in fact, make cyclical projections for centuries in advance. And interestingly enough, the Mayans had a crisis date a couple hundred years ago where they predicted some great disaster, and they had it. They had a particularly intense battle with the Spanish, and they lost. It may be the Mayans that are in trouble in 2012 rather than the world, but the world has got its own problems, for sure. I said many years ago, when I found the fixed star combinations that are involved in this, that by the year 2020 the world would either be entering a new dark ages, or have entered, or it will have finally begun to cope with the ecological problem. It's going to have to, one of those two things is going to have to happen, where we've just about run out of time. There's a wonderful word in Jungian psychology. It's called enantiodromia, and it means a race course running in two directions at once. And when you take anything sufficiently to the extreme, it turns into its opposite. China has done this. It's gone from being a left-wing dictatorship to a right-wing dictatorship. The primary thing the Chinese government is interested in doing is staying in power. Ideology be hanged. which makes them indistinguishable from Myanmar, which they interestingly support. And ditto the Sudan government is another example of that. The fact that Pluto has entered Capricorn suggests that the non-viable rigid structures of the world are going to be facing a crisis over the next 17 years. I say the non-viable. Ones that actually have their act together will probably solidify, because Pluto doesn't necessarily destroy. It can firm up that which works and destroy that which doesn't. In this country, I think we are at the end of a cycle of extreme right-wing activity, and it's dying for a very simple reason. It's failed. I mean, it's failed colossally. Whatever one may say about the waste and corruption of the years that were governed by liberals, and there was quite a bit of that, people were not in bad shape. And they may have had to contend with rules and regulations they didn't like, but they weren't in bad shape. Now they're in bad shape, and they still have rules and regulations they don't like. The only thing that they've done is they've cut back services. Taxes have gone up, waste has gone up, services have gone down, courtesy of your Republican Party. I won't make any bones about that position. I will say, however, for any conservatives that might hear this, that conservatism is not actually the problem. These people aren't conservatives. They're kleptocrats. You know what a kleptocrat is? Government by thieves. Being somewhat in debt myself, I'm speaking from personal experience, it was a great time to get out of debt as much as possible. The more you can disconnect yourself from highly centralized systems that require stability, the better. I'm not saying everybody has to go to the forest and do their own farming and everything, but the oil problem is going to probably kill the trucking industry as we know it. Fortunately, we do still have railroads, but they need to be rebuilt in many cases. That the individual can't take care of, but the individual can lose their taste for imported foods brought from great distances. I will give one startling example I personally encountered. I had a PT Cruiser up until a few days ago, which got mediocre at best gas mileage, and I've replaced it with a Prius, and we've cut our gasoline costs by 2/3 at one swoop, and paying about the same a month. Now, I'm not trying to be righteous here, but it demonstrates that there could be a sweeping change if low mileage per gallon automobiles were abandoned. Yes, it'll hurt Detroit, but I think Detroit is actually already making the adjustment. They're coming out with hybrid cars and cars with better gas mileage. Okay, maybe we give them a couple of years to catch up with the Japanese, but then I think people should get rid of the gas guzzlers. It's a simple act. We have sacrificed nothing except a couple of cubic feet of storage in the car, and that's all, a couple of cubic feet.